Let's talk about full and even impressions. Learning the force to use on each stamp is important. I'm working today with 3mm homeroom uppercase, and I've pulled out a J. It's important that when you begin your hand stamping journey, you start with soft metals such as alchemy or aluminum. Right here on my block is an alchemy blank. You want to begin by hitting your stamp once to get accustomed with the feel of using your stamps on soft metals. You want to make sure that the force you are using is leaving a complete impression on your blank. When I get a new set, I like to stamp out my font 3 times. I make sure that I go from stamping out using a heavy force, a medium, and I end with a light strike, like the 3 that I've stamped here. We're going to move on to our Willow Font set. Sometimes when a letter has serifs or is more complex and detailed, you should try using the tilt and tap method. By hitting your stamp once and tilting and tapping in each direction, you will get a full impression of your letter. Again, it's important to learn your stamp sets. For example, the uppercase letter I in Willow does not need more than 1 strike with your hammer. But the letter M, being that the letter is wider and has sharper serifs, you might need to use the tilt and tap method to get a full impression. Place your stamp down, flat. Give your stamp a hit in the center. Lightly bring your stamp towards you, making sure not to lift your stamp from the metal. Tap, away from you, side and side. This method will make sure that you have all of your serifs in your impression. Let's talk design stamps. Design stamps come in a wide range of sizes and skill levels. Some may need 1 hit, where other more complex and detailed design stamps need a little bit more finesse. A simple 3, 4, and 6mm design stamp, when used in soft metals, will only take 1 strike of your hammer to get a full and even impression. Using the same stamp on harder metals such as brass, copper, or stainless steel will require more force behind your strike, and combining that force with the tilt and tap method. A more detailed stamp in a 6, 9.5, and a 12, or our ultra detail stamps, require a little bit more skill behind it. And that is where your tilt, tap, and roll comes in. When using this technique, the most important thing to remember is to make sure that while you are tapping, tilting, and rolling, you are applying pressure to the stamp. Pressing it into the metal with your thumb, pointer, and index finger, and making sure the stamp does not lift completely off the blank. By tilt, tapping, and rolling, you'll be able to get a full impression on those more complex, detailed, larger stamps. You also want to make sure that when you're using a detailed stamp that you pay close attention to the area of the stamp where the design is more dense. You will have to strike it harder in that area while you are tilting and rolling. For example, I have a 12mm forged sprig stamp. I pay less attention to the bottom of my stamp because it just has a simple stem. I'm hitting my stamp harder when I am tilting on the side to where the sprig has more detail. Let's talk about understamping and overstamping and how easy it is to do both. I'm going to stamp the letter M twice. My first is going to be done with more of an aggressive hit. My second M, I'll stamp with a very light hit. We spoke about soft metals and how we need to strike them moderately. You will notice that the first M I stamped has a very heavy appearance, and that is because I gave it an aggressive hit with the hammer. When you stamp your metal, you're forging. When you forge into metal, your metal begins to spread. It creates a deeper, wider impression the harder you hit, sort of a distorted version of the original form of your letter. The second M was done with a much softer strike. See how the impression is barely noticeable, and the enamel, which is formulated to stay inside the impression, is barely holding any. That is understamping. Fortunately, with patience, you could fix an understamped impression. What you cannot fix is an overstamped impression. To fix your understamped impression, you are going to take your letter, hover over the impression, the light impression that you had stamped previously, and run your stamp in a diagonal motion until you feel your stamp fall into the impression stamped. I'm going to focus on the bottom half of my stamp with my hammer. I'm going to place it flat, lightly tilt it towards me where my impression was light, take my hammer, and give it a nice hit right at that bottom. ImpressArt soft metals consist of pewter, alchemy, and aluminum. With soft metals, you will have to use less force when stamping. It's important that you give one nice hit with your hammer. ImpressArt's harder metals consist of brass and copper. With these harder metals, you will need to use your tilt and tap depending on the complexity of the design in your stamp. You're going to need to hit your stamp with more of a force behind it when you are stamping into harder metals. ImpressArt's hardest metal of all is our stainless steel. With our stainless, you will also have to use our signature line of design stamps and letter sets that are rated for stainless steel.